The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the oxygen machine and the occasional rustle of sheets as Thomas shifted in his bed. The walls, once a vibrant blue, now seemed to echo the somber mood of the room, their color muted by the dim light filtering through the half-drawn curtains. Thomas lay there, his face pale and drawn, his breathing shallow. At 78, he had lived a full life, but now, as the end drew near, the weight of his years pressed heavily upon him. Beside the bed, curled up on a warm blanket, was Max, Thomas's loyal German shepherd. Max had been by Thomas's side for over a decade, a constant companion through the joys and sorrows of life. The dog's once glossy coat was now streaked with gray, and his movements were slower, more deliberate. But even in his old age, Max's devotion to Thomas was unwavering. Thomas's daughter, Emily, sat in a chair by the window, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. She had been by her father's side for days, watching as he grew weaker with each passing hour. The doctors had said there was nothing more they could do. It was only a matter of time now. Emily had tried to prepare herself for this moment, but no amount of preparation could ease the pain of losing her father. As the hours dragged on, Max remained steadfast by Thomas's side. The dog had refused to leave the room, even when Emily had tried to coax him out with food or the promise of a walk. Max would simply look at her with those soulful brown eyes as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere." Emily had always known that Max was special. Thomas had adopted him from a shelter when the dog was just a puppy, and from the very beginning, the bond between them had been unbreakable. Max had been there for Thomas through the loss of his wife, through the lonely nights when the house felt too big and too quiet. And now, as Thomas's life ebbed away, Max was there still, a silent sentinel keeping watch over his beloved master. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Thomas's breathing grew more labored. Emily reached out and took his hand, her heart breaking as she felt how cold and frail it had become. She leaned in close, whispering words of love and comfort, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. Max, sensing the change in the room, lifted his head and let out a soft whine. He nuzzled Thomas's hand, his warm breath brushing against the old man's skin. For a moment, Thomas's eyes fluttered open, and he turned his head slightly to look at Max. A faint smile touched his lips, and he whispered something so softly that Emily had to strain to hear it. "Good boy," Thomas murmured, his voice barely audible. "You've always been a good boy." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she watched the exchange. She had always known that Max was more than just a pet to her father. He was family. And now, as Thomas's life slipped away, Max was there, offering comfort and love in the only way he knew how. As the night wore on, Thomas's breathing grew shallower, and his grip on Emily's hand weakened. Max remained by his side, his head resting on the edge of the bed, his eyes never leaving Thomas's face. The dog's presence was a source of comfort, not just for Thomas, but for Emily as well. In those final hours, Max's unwavering loyalty was a reminder of the love that had filled Thomas's life, even in his darkest moments. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, Thomas took his last breath. Emily felt his hand go limp in hers, and she let out a sob, her heart shattering into a million pieces. Max let out a mournful howl, a sound so full of grief that it brought fresh tears to Emily's eyes. For a long time, neither Emily nor Max moved. They stayed there, frozen in their grief, as the world outside continued to turn, oblivious to the loss that had just occurred. Eventually, Emily reached out and gently stroked Max's head, her fingers trembling as they moved through his fur. "He's gone, Max," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's gone." Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored her own. He let out a soft whimper and nuzzled her hand, as if to offer what little comfort he could. Emily wrapped her arms around the dog, burying her face in his fur as she wept. In the days that followed, Emily struggled to come to terms with her father's death. The house felt emptier without him, the silence more oppressive. But through it all, Max was there, a constant presence by her side. The dog seemed to sense her pain, and he did his best to comfort her, just as he had comforted Thomas in his final hours. One evening, as Emily sat on the couch, staring at the empty chair where her father used to sit, Max came and laid his head in her lap. She absent-mindedly stroked his ears, her mind wandering back to the day Thomas had brought him home. "He was just a puppy then," she said softly, more to herself than to Max. "You were so small, but you had such a big heart. Dad always said you were the best thing that ever happened to him." Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. Emily felt a lump form in her throat as she realized just how much Max had meant to her father. The dog had been more than just a companion. He had been a source of joy, a reminder of the love that had filled Thomas's life. As the days turned into weeks, Emily found herself relying on Max more and more. The dog's presence was a comfort, a reminder that she wasn't alone in her grief. But as much as she appreciated Max's loyalty, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to his refusal to leave Thomas's side in those final hours. One afternoon, as Emily was going through her father's belongings, she came across an old photo album. She flipped through the pages, her heart aching as she saw pictures of her father and Max together. There were photos of them hiking in the mountains, playing in the backyard, and simply sitting together on the porch, enjoying the quiet moments of life. As she turned the pages, a small, folded piece of paper fell out of the album. Emily picked it up and unfolded it, her eyes scanning the words written in her father's familiar handwriting. "To my dearest Emily," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I want you to know how much I love you and how proud I am of the person you've become. But there's something else I need to tell you, something about Max." Emily's heart skipped a beat as she read on. "Max isn't just a dog," Thomas had written. "He's a part of me, a part of my soul. When I first brought him home, I knew there was something special about him. He had a way of understanding me, of knowing when I needed him most. And in those final days, when I knew my time was coming to an end, Max was there, just as he always was. I believe that Max knew what was happening to me, that he could sense the end was near. And I believe that he stayed by my side, not just out of loyalty, but because he wanted to make sure I wasn't alone. He wanted to be there for me, just as he had been for so many years. I know that losing me will be hard for you, Emily, but I want you to know that you're not alone. Max will be there for you, just as he was for me. He'll be your companion, your friend, and your source of comfort. And when the time comes, when he's ready to leave this world, I believe he'll come to me, just as he stayed by my side until the very end. Take care of him, Emily. Love him as I have loved him, and know that, through him, a part of me will always be with you." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she finished reading the letter. She looked over at Max, who was lying on the floor, his eyes half closed as he dozed. The dog seemed to sense her gaze, and he lifted his head, looking at her with those same soulful brown eyes. "Thank you, Max," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Thank you for being there for him, and thank you for being here for me." Max let out a soft whine and got to his feet, walking over to her and laying his head in her lap once more. Emily wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as she cried. In that moment, she understood the truth behind Max's refusal to leave her father's side. It wasn't just loyalty, it was love. A love so deep and so pure that it transcended words. A love that had bound them together in life and would continue to bind them in death. And as Emily held Max close, she knew that her father was right. Through Max, a part of him would always be with her, and in that knowledge, she found a measure of peace, a glimmer of hope in the midst of her grief. For as long as Max was by her side, she would never truly be alone. Like a video and subscribe to my channel, please. Thanks for watching.